Yes, welcome back to another episode of Speedway Nation. This one, our Christmas special, Ryan. We're pre-recording. We're at home with families, opening presents, all that fun stuff. The presents for Speedway fans come tomorrow on Boxing Day, but a very special guest to open the show tonight. 25 years of the Perth Motorplex being open this season. Ryan Harris, we've got a wonderful guest, the right person to talk to about all this.
Yes, we have. Con Migro is everything Speedway is in Western Australia, and we're excited to have Con Migro on the line. Con, welcome to the show, and Merry Christmas to you, and 25 years of the Motorplex. How good?
How are you guys? When Jared asked me to come on the show, I said my cover's been blown. I tell everyone I'm 35.
Well, you did well to
blown, 25 years.
you certainly did well to run Claremont when you were 10 years old, Con. So you did very well there, mate.
That's correct.
Hey, obviously, 25 years of the Motorplex. It's an exciting time for everyone in the West. An exciting time for your family as well. Things opening up back in 2000, there was obviously some nervous energy to match the history that Claremont held in everyone's heart, that special place that Claremont held. Did you ever think that we'd sort of get to the level where the Motorplex is now with how things feel moving on from Claremont? I'm assuming there's plenty of nervous energy around the time. I wasn't in the West at the time, so you'd be the person to talk to about that.
Well, it certainly was a lot of nervous energy, and it was not just similar to what happened in Sydney when the Sydney Speedway, Brisbane when the exhibition ground closed, and same as when Melbourne closed. I suppose you can add Adelaide when Rowley Park closed. I was fortunate to have been a personal friend of Richard Court, who was the then Premier of Western Australia, and he always said to me we were getting treated pretty roughly by our landlords, and he said to me, if you ever feel that you've got to move, make sure I'm the first person you talk to, so which I did. And fortunately for us and for me and everyone in West Australian Speedway, we had a pretty smooth moving from Claremont Showgrounds to the Perth Motorplex on Quinana Beach. But by gee, it's been a tough ride since then. In the last 5 years, my son Gavin, who runs the show now, has turned the place around and is kicking huge goals.
Yeah, it's the talk of the country, and everyone's watching with so much interest and so much pride to see how good the sport's going over there. And we all know that because it is a bit of a hike from Perth out to Quinana Beach, and you go down the freeway, and getting there on a Friday afternoon and all those things presented a lot of challenges, but you've overcome everything over there. It just seems to all seem to work now, and there's hype and anticipation, and everyone just turns up to the big events and supports it with their feet, which is just fantastic.
Well, I always told competitors when I ever spoke to them, and I also instilled in young Gav, was that we were leaders, not followers. And I believe that very, very sincerely, and I still believe that. We had to change from Friday night, which had been a tradition for over 50, 60 years in Perth, but the freeway was so difficult to travel. And even now, if you were on any day of the week, it's a virtually a car park, the Quinana Freeway. Fortunately, on Saturday afternoon, when we start to get the fans to come in, it's a pretty smooth sailing from either Mandurah, which is to the south, or Perth, which is in the north. And we're right plumb in the centre of both those big cities, and we've got very good freeway access to the ground, to Ankertel Road, and then into the complex that we've got now, the Perth Motorplex. And I would say I've been to every major track in the world more than once, with the exception of the latest Polish tracks, which have probably like Optus Stadium here in Perth.
Yeah.
But I would say that our stadium here in the Motorplex is without doubt one of the finest speedway circuits that ever been built, and it's one of the best still happening to this day.
Oh, it is. And to think they used to design that 25 years ago or better, and it's so fit for purpose still now. Like honestly, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up anyone, but if you were building a speedway, you would just rinse and repeat what you have done in the West. Seriously, anywhere you roll it out, it is just so magnificently designed. Everything makes sense. Everything's in the right place. It just works so well. It's a credit. It's credit to everyone involved. That's for sure. I was fortunate. I actually met Gary when he come over to Maryborough when I was at Maryborough, when there was some talk of a motorsport precinct sort of happening, and he was such a great guy to talk about and forward thinker, and you just obviously he's all gelled as a team at the time, and it just to build what you have has just been incredible.
Well, it was quite amazing. I was the one that went and spoke to Gary about joining forces because I said to him that Claremont was going. I knew the Ravens was going for the Drags, and I said, look, there's no way in the world we're both going to get 50 or 60 acres of land or 50 or 60 hectares of what you want to call it together. So why don't we join forces? And at the beginning, he didn't really think it was a very good idea. He felt that his sport could stand alone, and I suppose to a certain extent we did. I know a lot of Speedway people also questioned why we did it. But look, we had to be practical to get land close to the city to make it a viable proposition for both. Well, there's no way in the world we're going to get the same amount. And I said to Gary, Speedway was the flavour of the month, and I'm sure that Speedway would get the venue or the nod before you do. So eventually he spoke to his brothers, and they then, they joined forces, and they then, the three boys, the Meislich boys, they brought out my other partners, and so there was myself and Gary just left to do it, and away we went. And I suppose the rest is history. When we opened the Speedway, we had a massive crowd. We had a few problems that unfortunately probably put a bit of a damper on Speedway from the point of view of we tried to get 15,000 people into a venue on a Friday night, and it was very difficult. In the end, we got them going. And then for the next 10 or 15 years, we struggled. We had good crowds, bad crowds, up and down. But the last 5 years, with Gavin at the controls and a new attitude, better racing cars, etc., sprint cars, speed cars, whatever you want to call them, and all of a sudden the sport's turned around, and we are the flavour of the month, and we're still continuing to bring world-class competitors. And as of Boxing Day this year, that's not going to be any different because there's 10 fabulous Americans arriving here in Western Australia. They'll be competing throughout the December-January period.
Yeah, it's incredible, absolutely, isn't it? Just phenomenal.
Yeah, it's and like you said, you guys haven't had it perfect all the way along. You've had your ups and downs along the way. Was there times where things were looking a little bit dire in the middle part of that period in the last 25 years, Con, where you're like, far out, it worked at Claremont, it was nice, it was all good. What are we doing over here? Obviously, things have worked out for the better now, but did you have those moments along the way where you sort of doubted, why do we build this motorplex out here away from the centre of the city, all that sort of stuff?
Well, for me personally, it was a huge loss for me. Personally, I lost considerable amounts of money, and in the end, I just wasn't prepared to pour any more money into the place because, quite frankly, I'd sacrificed most of my adult life to the sport, and I wasn't fair to my wife. But anyway, I decided to pull out of it about 15 odd years ago, and the Moskviches run them for a while, and then they found the going was too tough as well, so they handed it back to the government. In the meantime, Gavin was employed. I'm still very much involved doing regular TV and radio shows in Perth. But anyway, Gavin took over the reins, and he was an ex-competitor, and I think that he's got around him a wonderful staff. They're all young people, men and women, and they've all got a real spring in their feet. They love what they're doing, and you see that reflects in what happens when you go to watch a race meeting now. It's more than just a night out. It's an event. It's a happening. And everyone comes out with smiles on their faces. And then again, some of the racing that we've been dished up, I've again, not trying to sound like a big head, but I don't think I've ever seen racing anywhere better in the world. It's just unbelievable what's being produced on a regular basis. You can't get it right every week. We all know that. But most nights, and I just want to quote something that Gary Rush said to me, and he's probably one of the finest competitors this country's ever produced in sprint cars. And when he raced at the Motorplex, he said to me, Con, as far as I'm concerned, until other states can follow what you guys have done here in Western Australia, I believe that all car divisions' national titles should be held at the Motorplex. And then he was trying to get the Motorplex, or a similar Motorplex, going in Sydney. And he did say to me just recently, and I hope I'm not saying something I shouldn't, but he said it's one of his biggest disappointments, the failure really of what's happening in Sydney. And I'm disappointed about that because we really need it. And Australia needs a strong Sydney.
Yeah, amen to that, that's for sure. So talking about Australian titles quickly, what was the first Australian titles you held at the Motorplex? What was the first one? When was it?
I'm not too sure. I think we had a speed car.
Yeah.
We had a speed car. We had a sprint car. We've had every division, Formula 500s. We've had late model sedans. We've got a late model one this year. I just can't really remember the top off my head, but we've run several national titles. But the biggest winner for us is that we've always used Boxing Day as the launch of the real launch of our season, I would say. And we've always brought over top Americans to compete, and they've always worked very, very well. This year there's 10 of them, so let's hope it works 10 times better. But I do know that Gavin has completely sold out the whole gold area for the Speedway series, and that is quite unbelievable. Now, in the days of Clement, even when I first took over the Motorplex, there was no pre-sales at all. We had to rely on people rolling up the gate and paying. Well, today, they already know in their hearts of hearts, and whatever you want to call it, that Boxing Day, from the gold point of view, and the early January meetings, those gold areas have been sold. And that is a wonderful thing to think that you've got that advantage to know that you know that the event's going to be good because everyone's talking about it. The phone calls are ringing the phones off the hook.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Now, I did just have a look for you, Con. The Australian late model title, I believe, was the first Australian title held there. So 2001, I believe, was the Australian late model title there. So that was a Queenslander that won that.
That's Alan Butcher won that. Alan Butcher won that from Queensland.
We had to have something go for us.
That's right. And you know what? And I'll tell you what, there was one night that we really got the track, not quite right. And it was like Beirut or in the middle of the Sahara Desert. But man, oh man, did this guy, he turned on an unbelievable show. And from there, like, the late models have got to a stage now that they're nearly the top division to watch as far as racing is concerned. They're 3 and 4 wide around this big bowl we've got at Kwinana.
They really work well around the Motorplex. Hey, Con, we've almost run out of time, but I've got to ask you, do you have a favourite moment? I know that's impossible to pick out of 25 years, but do you have something that stands out as a personal memory or something that just really tickles the heartstrings for you from the Motorplex from the last 25 years?
Well, I think that the opening night crowd, when Richard Court came down to open the track, that made me extremely proud. But it was a disaster as far as trying to get the people in. And since then, I just think that what we're experiencing in Western Australia at the moment, that's another one. I mean, this is quite unique. I don't think there's many tracks in the world, big or small, that are enjoying what is currently happening at the Motorplex at the moment. And I'm glad that I'm right amongst it. I'm not running the show now, but I'm still deeply involved in helping the place tick.
Yeah, it certainly wouldn't be the same without your signature sign-off at the end of every TV commercial. You've got to give us one to lead us out of the segment, Con. High Limit, USA versus WA Speed Week. It's going to be a massive, massive December and January period at the Motorplex. And Con, lead us out. Thank you, Con. It's been wonderful to have you on the show.